Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Timo Parker. I'm a vocal coach and I'm here to help you to improve your singing voice. In today's video I want to talk about the sound development of your voice when you are starting to sing, when you start to work with muscles in your throat in order to create sounds. So I have talked about a lot of different muscles already on this channel, so if this is your first video you can dive down to the playlist and to videos that I linked that are relevant. You can check them out, but basically we want to go through the sounds, the levels, the stages, whatever you want to call it, that you're probably going to go through when you start training your muscles in your throat. So, without further ado, let's dive right into it. If you've seen previous videos on this channel, you know that I'm always preaching about not using air pressure, not using falsetto to develop your voice. In case you've missed them, I link them below. But today we want to talk about which sound stages you go through, how your voice develops over time when you start training your muscles. So one of the first things that we have to do, and I talk about this in the videos linked below, is that we want to create a balance between the yawning muscle and the swallowing muscle, so that our thyroid cartilage, aka larynx, can be in a mid or low position in our throat, so we can use muscles to create this forward shift and tilt to stretch our vocal cords, so good things in order to sing higher. So now we want to focus on training the yawning muscle. This is the first step for 99% of all people that start with this kind of training in order to get this balance back between swallowing muscle and yawning muscle. Very quick recap, the yawning muscle most of the times is overstretched because we don't contract it as often, we don't use it as often, and the swallowing muscle is shortened because we contract it all the time when we swallow. So now when we are yawning and we get this muscle engaged, we get this yawny sound. And what happens most of the times when people start training this yawning muscle, and especially when we start bringing this yawning sensation into a sound, so for example, something like this, okay? What happens most of the times is that people have trouble to let go and to use this muscle in an isolated manner. So what they do is that they tense up and they try to use supporting muscle around their throat, inside of their throat, they're tensing up, and then this liberating open feeling becomes more a different sensation. So for example, what I hear a lot is that this dark sound, open sound goes to something like, so there's a lot of tension and there is a lot of willpower to control the sound, and that's I think one of the biggest problems in the beginning, that you start to relax into the sound. It's also a bit foreign, it's not something that you usually do that often. Maybe in the morning when you get up and you're like, okay, I'm getting ready and whatever, when you're talking while you yawn, right? We all had this experience. And this sound stage is the first stage that most people go through, which lasts for quite a while in the beginning, and that's completely normal. And that is the very dark sound, this almost primal sound, I like to call it, where you just this kind of sounds. And with these sounds, what happens, because most of the times we may be tensing up in the beginning, is that we're increasing air pressure a little bit. A problem that I see a lot when I'm teaching is that people try to imitate my sound. So now you have to understand that I've been training this way already for years now. So that means my system is already much more open than, for example, a person that is just starting out to train these muscles. And if this person tries to imitate me, this person has no other chance in order to sound anything close to me than to use air pressure. And that's why I'm always saying, stay with your own bodily sensation, focus on that you stay relaxed, and then you try to imitate the sound as good as you can and not as close as you can. And that's a very important difference that we have to make. So the sound in the beginning gets very dark, and that's normal because what we are trying to achieve with this open sound is that we are trying to minimize the risk of going into falsetto. Because if the thyroid cartilage is in a very low position, aka larynx, thyroid cartilage, larynx, is in a very low and open position, also another video that you can check out, open thyroid cartilage, low thyroid cartilage. If this is the case, it is pretty unlikely that you can go into falsetto. It can still happen occasionally, some exceptions there, but usually if you're able to keep it open and low, it's almost impossible to go into falsetto. And the reason is because when you are singing in falsetto, you're mobilizing parts of your vocal cords. So your vocal cords are attached in the front to the thyroid cartilage, in the back to the arytenoid cartilages. The arytenoid cartilages can move and they close or open the vocal cords. So when they are apart, we have something in between called the rima glottides, space between the vocal cords, and when they close, they don't let any air through and they close firmly, depending on what adjustment you are using. And when we are now using this open and low thyroid cartilage sound, this, what happens here is that the vocal cords are in a position where they're further away from each other. That's why there's more air coming through. I'm not pushing air, I'm not doing so I'm not exhaling, but I just let air pass through. And if you hold a hand in front of your mouth, you realize it's actually not much air that is coming out when you're doing this. So when you sing in this adjustment and your vocal cords are further apart from each other, you can't really go into falsetto, because falsetto needs to have a little closure in the front first. So there's an immobilization happening in the vocal cord, and then we use a shorter string. So instead of the full string, we just use the back part here and we start to vibrate. And that's why we are using these open sounds. And this is the stage that people go through, sometimes even for years. And that is pretty normal, and that is also pretty okay. So the problem why most people back out is because one thing I made a video about holding, what is holding you back, it's your ego. Because you don't want to accept that when you take the air pressure away, that your sound is pretty small. Because if air pressure was one of the main reasons why your voice is loud, then you will lose all the volume, you will lose maybe some certain sound characteristic that you're used to, and that's a huge hit for the ego in the beginning. I've been through this, and pretty much all of the people who trained this way have been through this journey, and that's pretty normal. So you have, in the beginning, you have the feeling like you're going 5 steps back. But we have to go 5 steps back in order to train the muscles, to hit the muscles right without using tension and air pressure. And that means that we start from 0, or in some cases maybe -5, -10. I definitely didn't start from 0. I was a singer that used a lot of air pressure before I started working with this technique. And we are just making sure with this open adjustment that we are not going into falsetto. Because air pressure is relatively easy to spot by yourself, because if there's any discomfort happening and any trouble to go into higher registers without a flip, without going into falsetto, you actually can feel it very well. But in the beginning, spotting falsetto by yourself, if you don't know what you should look out for and you don't know how an open sound feels, it is really hard to do this by yourself. And that's why it is so important to first start with this open sounds. We might risk here and there a bit of air pressure, but in most cases, there are some exceptions. In most cases, it's better to have maybe a slight minimal pressure under the voice instead of going to falsetto, and you're always going into falsetto and you're not training your muscle that is responsible for your vocal range. Ideally, we don't want to have any tension or any air pressure, but most of the times this is also a journey that just not happens from one day to another. It takes practice and it takes a bit of time. So once you have established this dark sound and it's starting to get easy, what you are starting to focus on then is actually, while you still extend your vocal range, then you start exploring a bit of sharper sounds. So in the beginning, the vocal cord closure is not very important. We still want to practice it, but because there's a risk of going into falsetto in the beginning, because connected head voice, like closed vocal cords and falsetto in a certain register in the beginning, are very close to each other, and that's why it's the safer road to do these open sounds. So then you start to go from these open sounds and you focus maybe a bit more on the connected sound again. So you have a less airy sound, but it's still very dark. So you still focus on something like this that sounds pretty dark. Maybe for some people even say very classical. But this is just a way, it's just an extra insurance to make sure that you are growing. And once you've achieved that, then you might explore even sharper sounds. So the basic concept here is that you first find an adjustment that is safe to practice with, so an open sound. And then once this is established, and this is happening with consistency, and you are not doing anything to harm your voice or to minimize your progress over time, then you can start exploring some more sounds. Depending on how willing you are to let go in the beginning, you can progress with these open sounds fairly quickly. For most people, it takes a bit more time because it's not only a physical thing that we have to train here, but also a mental thing of we are letting go, we are listening to our body, and we are tuning into ourselves. And that takes a bit of time to get to know yourself and to get to know your voice. So that's completely normal. And over time, when you continue doing these things, you will realize that your sound gets sharper and sharper again. So first we start very dark, and then within this darkness we are incorporating more and more sharper sounds into it. And this is a very opposite approach of what most people want to do, because most people want to start with big chest voice sounds, very sharp sounds. And the problem is, if you haven't prepped your instrument here and you're still fighting maybe with pressure and tension, these things will not help you on your journey to grow your voice. You might be able to sustain this for a certain amount of time, but since you are dependent on the air pressure, it is pretty likely that over time your muscles will deteriorate and your voice gets actually weaker because you use more and more air and more tension to get the sound out that you are used to. And that's why it's better to rather start sooner with a gentle approach of opening up your voice first to accept this darker sound, to take the cruel hit of the ego in the beginning and then build up from there, instead of, for example, building a career on something that is not helping you, and then over time, when you have reached already a certain point, you have to go all the way back down and then maybe take a different path uphill to climb the mountain. So basically, you are on the right track if you are accepting where you are right now, sound-wise, that you are accepting sounds that might be a bit foreign, let's say primal, dark, pretty even for some people, very off-putting, this Yawny sound for a lot of people, which is totally fine and normal. But in order to open up your instrument, this is an absolute essential way to integrate into your practice and into your routine. And before I wrap up this video, I want to mention one very important point. Nowadays, the way we are living, we are always in a hurry, we are in a rush. And that means that we might not have so much patience sometimes. If we desire something, we want it straight away, we want to have it the fastest way possible. Maybe there's even a deadline. In 1 year I have to record an album, in 6 months I have a certain gig, and you try to push yourself to be at a certain level in a very short amount of time. And even though I believe that everything is possible if you want it and you work towards it, when we are talking about a time frame, there are certain limits, right? Like within 6 months or 1 year, you can't expect to sound like a professional that has been in the business for a decade or even longer. Not only singers, but especially instrumentalists know that it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to develop this skill on a very high level. And this goes as well with singing. What I want to say is that on this journey, don't put too much pressure on you because of a certain deadline, and accept these imperfections on the way, because you want to become the best singing version of yourself, and this requires time. And there's also good possibility that you maybe never reach this level that you are idolizing, because the thing is, once you reach the level that you thought you are satisfied with, we find new things that we can improve. So it's a constant journey. And on this journey, you always want to look out for the long run. What I'm doing right now, is this sustainable? Is this something that helps me moving forward with my voice, with my singing career? And if the answer is no, because you're hoarse after the gig and you're struggling, then you should rethink the mentality of how you approach singing and how you approach your practice. And that's why I got inspired to do this video, because I think it is really important to hear that, especially in the beginning, we are not focusing on sound quality, but we are focusing on muscle balance, and we are focusing on getting the right anatomy and the right muscle coordination. It's the same thing when you start learning arpeggios or scales, especially on the guitar. Even though you're fretting the right string, sometimes the string slurs because you maybe don't put the right pressure or you're not in the right position, and over time you fine-tune these skills, these fine motor skills that you need in order to execute these movements effortlessly. And that's the point. We want to do it effortlessly. And in order to do this, it takes time and practice. Alright, that's it for today. I hope this video could help you shifting your perspective if you needed it. Maybe you were there already. If this is the case, good on you. Keep going. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And if you're interested in working with me, make sure to check out the link below to my website where you can book one-on-one classes with me. In these classes, we can focus on your individual goal and make sure that you're using the right muscles on your singing journey. So I would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I see you in the next video. Bye bye.